Does California care about you? The question comes down, there's a new rule by 2035, all cars being sold in California have got to be zero emissions. Zero emissions. That means they have to be an electric vehicle. So what does that mean? Well, there's a couple different things that means. Stick around to this. I'll tell you what this means for you as an individual, for you as a consumer, for you as a Californian, and is there a possibility that this is tied to people leaving California or not wanting to come to California? I guess that's the question. Like, thumbs up, ask questions, please give me any feedback that you got for me. I'm always happy to accept it and to interact with you. Please ask me any questions. So, California is pushing to be selling all zero-emission vehicles by 2035. It's the CARB Advanced Clean Cars 2 rule. It sets an interim milestone requiring 35% of new vehicles to produce zero emissions. That rapidly increases to nearly 70% of new vehicles by 2030, further increasing to 100% by 2035. That's the model year, and that's what they're pushing for. What's really interesting is that California actually has a huge share of vehicles in the United States. California is a big state, and so I guess it makes sense when you think about it from that perspective. So what does this mean? One of the things that I think of, if all of the vehicles are going to be electric vehicles, listen, I'm all for electric vehicles. I don't know anybody who is against doing what they want to do for the worse of the world. But what it comes down to, is this the best thing for all? By 2035, we need to change into an electric vehicle. Electric vehicles are extremely expensive. The base model electric vehicle is out the door around $45,000. And if you want to get an electric vehicle that has all the bells and whistles, you're typically looking at about $110,000 even more. And so electric vehicle is not cheap. And then on top of that, like I've talked about in a previous video, electric vehicle is not cheap to charge either. So then some people will pivot over to saying, well, if you have solar, then it makes it all worthwhile. One of the questions that comes up with solar is, if you pay $400 to $450 a month for electricity, and let's say that you pay $400 to $450 a month for an electric vehicle on top of that, so now you're looking at $900 a month. So if you take that and if you purchase solar, the price of solar during the current time of all of the pressure on the economy and inflation, the price of solar and solar panels has also gone up tremendously. So when you're talking about getting solar, your base is maybe about $50,000 or $60,000 to run the energy in your home that needs to be run. So that $50,000 or $60,000 over the course of time, when you're paying the base of $450 to maybe $300 a month for electricity, then it kind of wipes out the math of wanting to get solar. Or is the purpose to charge an electric vehicle so it'll cost more in electricity, so then you get solar and so it makes more sense? At the end of the day, if you take, let's say at the end of the day that you're paying $400 a month for electricity and it costs $60,000 for solar. Well, based on that, in order to kind of break even when you're really looking at it, it would be 150 months, which is 12 and a half years. Based on the 12 and a half years, or that 160 months, you'll be looking at 12 and a half years. The average time of selling a home is between 7 and 8 years. So it's going to take you over that amount of time to actually make the money back on the solar. So what makes the most sense here? Now, one of the important things to pay attention to here also is that by 2035, and again, not loving the idea of making every vehicle in California be electric by 2035, just because it doesn't make sense. Now, if we as a state are able to push up the energy creation in different ways, maybe it makes sense. Currently, our power grid is actually so stressed under the current heat wave that we're having that they're talking about starting to have rolling brownouts or rolling blackouts where certain grids are being shut down to save energy. And they're already asking us as citizens of California to have our thermostat set at 78 if there's an air conditioning, and to stop using major appliances between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. Now, California and Californians are, I feel, very amicable when it comes to working inside of these parameters. But I also feel like there has to come a point where 2035 being sold all new electric vehicles, does it make sense, I guess is the question. I don't know that it makes sense, but one piece to this puzzle that I feel not a lot of people are talking about is that gasoline vehicles are not going to be banned. Not to mention, gasoline vehicles will continue to be sold if they're a used vehicle. So that does bring up another question. Will the gasoline vehicle become more expensive because they're not being reproduced for California? Second question, will gasoline become more expensive, even more expensive than we're currently seeing at $5.50 to $6 a gallon? Those are kind of the two questions that really come up off the top of my head. And there's going to be more questions to follow. So California does have 30 million registered cars and trucks. As I said, California has got a huge amount of vehicles and holds the largest share when it comes to the United States. In 2021, there was registered an additional 1.8 million vehicles, new vehicles, and roughly 8% were electric. And California does also have the most electric vehicles along with the most vehicles. So 8% of those vehicles that were registered last year were electric out of the 1.8 million. So 8% out of the 1.8 million cars in California registered were electric last year. That means it's 144,000 cars that were registered last year in 2021. 144,000 cars that were electric out of the 1.8 million vehicles that were actually registered in California. So that means that by 2035, they're proposing that we have 100% electric vehicles that are new sold. I don't know if the numbers make sense. The solar is a tough one as well. I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I'm just looking at this and saying, I think it's very interesting. I'm very interested to see how will this all roll out. Will we be able to make this work? I personally have faith that everything works out in time. I do feel like this 2035 push might be a push to see what can we get done by the 2035. Let me know what you think. Please make comments. Let me know what questions you have, whether it be solar, whether it be electric vehicles, or whether it be real estate. Let me know what you think. Please like, please subscribe. I'm always here and happy to help with any questions that you might need answered. Take care.